All right, probably good for us to jump in and get started. There'll likely be people trickling in. But hi guys, I'm Amanda Windsor. I'm excited to be chatting and presenting with you guys today. I hope this is more than anything a dialogue for us. So please feel free to use the chat function, the question and answer stuff. Make your comments, make sure it's just toggled to session. Otherwise, we'll be chatting to the entire event, which that's fine too. But just wanted to let you know that. Today, what we're going to go through is we're going to be discussing coding curriculum to engage every student with insights. Know that in West Virginia in particular, obviously computer science, coding education, it's definitely top of mind, but is something that has been a little bit slower to put into practice. So wanting to give you guys some tools, some resources, some ideas to help make this even more accessible and help bring this to life for you guys across the state in your communities and in your classrooms. What I'm going to do though to start things here is think it's important for you guys to know a bit more about who I am. Why the heck am I talking to you about all of this? So like I said, my name's Amanda. I'm the Vice President of Customer Development, specifically related to our education initiatives at Dizzy Code Illusion. Dizzy Code Illusion is a comprehensive coding education program created by Life is Tech. I'll tell you guys a bit more about them in just a second here. But specifically for myself, so I am a coding education curriculum creation and implementation expert. Love working with educators at all levels within the school system, as well as students themselves to help to make sure that the curriculum we create is as impactful and robust, comprehensive, engaging, entertaining as possible. To date, we've worked with thousands of schools to help them roll out custom coding projects that kind of map in and roll up to school-wide, district-wide, statewide standards, goals, things of that nature. So very well versed in kind of the nuances of what's expected as it comes to coding programs and curriculum. And let me tell you, it is, I'm sure you're aware, it is very tough as it seems that, there can be a lot that changes from school to school, district to district, state to state. So I really enjoy getting to create that custom curriculum that helps meet the needs of wherever essentially your school is at, be it, experience level, educator level, tech stack, things of that nature. As a company, our core mission is to nurture and maximize each learner's unique potential. And so for me, I really take that to heart. And when I'm working, with schools and educators, that's a big priority for me, is to continue to uphold those bits and pieces. So moving forward here. Telling you a bit more about who we are as a company. I think this is important just to set the stage, because again, who's talking to you, why are we talking to you, and kind of, what makes us qualified to be in this seat to be chatting to you about coding curriculum. So Life is Tech is the company that has created Dizzy Code Illusion. The program was created out of 10 plus years of experience, teaching over 150,000 students, both in virtual and face-to-face interaction. So obviously we all know last year kind of threw us a big curveball when it came to education. That's something that we've actually kind of had baked into the model beforehand. And so essentially out of that though, Dizzy Code Illusion for Schools was created. Big thing there is that we want to address the gaps in the current education system. And we do this by working directly, schools, school districts across the country. West Virginia being one of the states that we are, heavily focused on currently and working actively within. And when I say those gaps in the education system, what I'm referring to, so this can be, educational gaps. So it can be whether it is on the student side or the educator side. It can be income gaps. So again, funds that are available and that being a barrier to entry for accessing quality materials and resources. It can also be, resource gaps, not knowing what to utilize in certain areas, not having access to appropriate information. And so we look to tackle those things head on through the program that we created, Dizzy Code Illusion for Schools. Within the program itself, though, some things that we're focused on is providing that best learning experience possible. So want to make it as teacher and student friendly. When we talk about computer science, coding education, I think so often, naturally we're very much focused on the students, their experience, and what they're going to get out of things, and being concerned with kind of their reservations, hesitations, apprehension, things of that nature. But I think it's important for us to also acknowledge that as educators, not I would say it is more rare to have a computer science or a technology teacher that comes from that background. So there can be a little bit of anxiety that comes into being tasked with teaching a computer science or a coding education class or leading a club or something like that. So for the program itself, we want to make it as accessible and friendly for both the teachers and the students. Additionally, we want it to be comprehensive and engaging. We want it to have quality resources, but are coupled and created in a way that are super fun, super accessible, where the students want to continue to learn with it and don't burn out. Also, big thing for us is having this program focus on the joy of creation. So very output oriented, want to encourage a trial and error mindset, not so opposed to on getting things wrong, but more so just being curious and being excited to create and the possibilities that can be unlocked in these young learners' minds as we go through that. And then the last bit just about the program, and then I promise we'll switch off of the about us stuff and more so into the curriculum and insights there, is that the program itself has been developed by industry icons, so has a really good legacy and heritage within the space. The former CTO at Square Enix, so he worked, Final Fantasy, he's worked on Sonic the Hedgehog, some of these things, played a very big role in the creation of Disney Code Illusion. So big thing there is that obviously the gamification piece is there, and it's kind of walking the walk and talking the talk. So not only are we trying to, foster this and create this next wave of programmers and coders, but we are doing it coming from a place with people that have actually done it themselves. So again, kind of enough about us on that front, and excited to dig into the curriculum bits here. So, let's talk coding. I'm sure what's on this screen here is likely very familiar to you, whether it's been in your own head as an educator, as you had to potentially facilitate with a class or a group of students, or, if you're a little bit higher up and you're like, this is probably something that my educators think, or truthfully, this is probably what your students are thinking or have said to you at different times. Computers are too hard. I'm not good at typing. Coding is boring. Or it can go the other way where this is too easy. There's lots of opinions, lots of chatter, lots of apprehension that comes into it when new subject matter is going to be discussed, especially with coding education. You add the computers in, the technology. Even while the students, are kind of growing up in this digital age, there still is an element of computer literacy that can be lacking at times. And so it can be a little bit overwhelming and a bit much for learners. And so what we need to do to address this is we need to take into account the way that each student learns differently to make sure that we're keeping their mind open to the possibilities. I'm sure you guys are familiar, but especially within STEM, so coding education falls into that. If there's a negative experience early on, it can shut a student's mind down to the possibility of continuing to pursue careers, further knowledge, anything of that nature for the rest of their life. And that's pretty wild if you think about it. But, as a second grader, third grader, fourth grader, fifth grader, if you have a bad experience with coding, with computers, something like that, you could totally shut yourself down. And, you're only 9, 10 years old. So I want to make sure that we're kind of addressing this head on and making these experiences as positive as we can. Before we dive into things here, just another reminder to you all, if you have questions, comments, things like that, feel free to pop them into the chat or into the Q&A section. Again, make sure you're sending it to the session, otherwise it'll go to the event. We can take those live as they come in, or we'll have strategic kind of question breaks that are built in through this as well. So moving on here, get the screen, there we go. So from where we're standing, we believe that those doubts that we just chatted about don't necessarily need to be the case. So with an inclusive and a diversified curriculum, coding for students becomes very accessible, very understandable, and it's something that can be truthfully enjoyable across the board. So both for the educator and the students, everyone involved can have a really good time as you're all kind of learning and growing together. So how do we do that? We have compiled 6 ideas here for you to engage all students. Again, this list is not exhaustive. These are just some of the ones that we kind of, like the best food for thought to get the ball rolling and to get the wheels turning in your brain a little bit more. But there's definitely a lot of other things that we can do outside of this, but these are the 6 that we, kind of gravitate towards the most. The 6 that we're going to chat through in greater detail, we'll do quick, high-level bullets, but actionable call-outs of how you can put this into practice. I think that's a really big piece. I know personally I get frustrated when there's no real takeaway from whether it's a blog post or a conversation, a webinar. So I want to make things as actionable as possible for you guys. So what we're going to chat through is first, do first, analyze second. The next bit is a step-by-step approach. Our third tip here is to practice live. Fourth is to ensure that you're blending entertainment and education. 5 is to get off the screen. That's actually one of my favorite ones. It's very counterintuitive, but seen it work very, very well in the classroom setting, especially for when you do come back to the screen. And then 6, drawing real world connections. I think that one, makes a lot of sense and is kind of like a no duh kind of thing, but you'd be surprised how often that is neglected or overlooked. So diving in here. So first of all, we're going to talk about doing first and analyzing second. As we do this here, what we're wanting to encourage is letting students kind of be the leader of their coding education and programming journey, or at least that's what we want them to think. Granted, we're strategically and intentionally putting them into these settings, but we want their curiosity to be piqued and kind of drive their learning journey, so to speak. So what we have them do is we have them interact with their environment in order to adapt and learn, and kind of naturally, based on how they experience by doing first, they will start to get to pieces where they're asking questions naturally. So if you throw them in or utilize a program, right, that's using like a self-propelled learning cycle, so they're set up for success, it's scaffolds, building block approach, but what they're able to do within those lessons, while they think that they're just kind of going through, playing a lesson, learning a little bit, they'll naturally start wondering and connecting the dots. It could be concepts like functions, syntax, or almost like that trial and error mindset of what happens if I do this? And naturally that curiosity will be piqued and they'll start to learn. And this is then going to be kind of that reverse approach from theory-based education. And so what we want them to do by doing first, analyzing second, is that the theory then naturally comes in second. This is really good for those learners that I'm sure you guys, in your classes, you see this a lot, but ones that kind of lose interest quickly, maybe it's hard to get them engaged from the jump. By kind of cutting them free first and then circling back second to debrief, nurture that curiosity and reinforce key concepts, it's going to keep them kind of interested as they progress through. I know oftentimes we can lose students when we start very much theory-based and we're drilling stuff into them that they kind of have no bridge to connect to that just doesn't ultimately make sense. And so again, want to recommend doing first, analyzing second. A way to put this into practice is that there are a handful of good resources and programs that utilize what we like to call a self-propelled learning cycle. So again, the student is in the driver's seat. This doesn't mean, though, that there's no need for educators, facilitators. Again, it all has to be done very intentionally, but the student is kind of self-sustaining and in charge of their kind of educational discovery and path forward. And then again, once they complete, a set of lessons, what you have defined for that class session, want to make sure that we are thoughtfully and intentionally debriefing with them to help nurture that curiosity, reinforce those key concepts for the students. So we do end up covering off on those. The next one here is utilizing a step-by-step approach. So within our step-by-step approach here, this is kind of on the other end of the spectrum. So those students that might love the do first, analyze second, that could make your students that like to fit into or have a little bit more structure, predefined rules, knowing what is right, what is wrong, that could make them a little uncomfortable. So with the step-by-step approach, that's how we make them, the other set of learners, a bit more comfortable. So again, as it says here, some learners thrive with a bit more structure. We don't want them to feel overwhelmed. We want them to feel like all of this is accessible, achievable, and attainable. So what we do here is introduce those coding concepts, and we want to break them down into bite-sized pieces with supportive exercises. So again, think of the building blocks, and I'll use this expression a lot for you. I guess stairs are a really good analogy in this context here. But want to take those bite-sized pieces, those little steps that are going to scaffold to take us from beginner to intermediate to advanced, and do so in a way that is intentional, thoughtful, and makes these students, again, not feel so overwhelmed. So what you can do personally is you can create essentially these little knowledge checks to reinforce these key concepts. So these can be multiple choice questions, they can be quizzes. Again, don't want to get too caught up in the quiz terminology if you're wanting it to be more free form, so it can kind of fit your class structure however you need it. You can also utilize code reviews to help develop your students' attention to detail. So again, these are just kind of more external assignments and things to reinforce these concepts. With the code reviews, this can be peer-to-peer code reviews, so where you can have students collaborating together to kind of nurture that attention to detail. It can be a class-wide thing, where you anonymize some code output, pop it up onto the projector, present it to the class, and you kind of do a whole classroom edit. That's a good way to kind of also facilitate that teamwork component. Or you can also create yourself assignments that are in a Mad Lib format. If you're familiar with the Mad Lib format, obviously you would have your entire kind of paragraph with keywords, phrases missing, where the students populate that in based off of instructions. With coding, it's no different. You have your line of code, you have your instructions that are for key functions, outputs, things like that. They populate that through, and then they'll have a piece of workable code that will populate into the output window. So again, you can create this on your own, or best bet, lots of programs. You want to look for these pieces in programs that you might want to utilize in your classroom. So programs that utilize these knowledge checks, they have code reviews, they have external assignments that utilize these Mad Lib formats. Again, everything that's going to make the curriculum very accessible, attainable, and achievable for your students. And again, keep them from feeling overwhelmed, because we know if the students get overwhelmed, have a negative experience, check out, and they can turn their brain off to the possibilities that exist with computer programming and education. Moving on here, we are going to pop into practicing live. This is another super fun one, and one that I've seen utilized that can be really, really beneficial. So essentially with this, this is great to pull in if you have students at varying levels, which naturally that's going to kind of be in every class. But what this does is it maintains class interest, and it's going to keep all levels of coders engaged at the same time, and they can learn from one another while this happens. So we approach this kind of similar to a pyramid. Every person builds on the last step. Again, talking about steps, I told you that would come back in, to reach a final solution here. So what we want to do, putting it into practice, actually bringing it into your school or into your classroom, what you can do as the educator is share your screen. What you're going to do is you will present the coding problem on the shared screen. You yourself can write or narrate the initial line of code to the first student that's going to take that over. Then you ask one student to write the next line of code. They need to explain their thought process. Then the group will evaluate the student's code, asking for needed errors and corrections. And then the other students, as they're inputting and giving feedback onto that first line of code, they're also copying that into their own system to keep everyone kind of engaged so no one is, distracted or doing something else. And then you kind of rinse and repeat and do that over and over and over with the students, repeating those steps 3 through 5 until a solution is fully executed there. It's really great because it brings the lessons down to a very followable and trackable pace, but it also harnesses, the encouraging power of teamwork. And so you're able to pull out this live coding problem, and it gives you that perfect blend of observation and participation. So a really fun way, again, to kind of make this digestible and engaging for all of your students, regardless of their skill level and their experience level. Alrighty. Moving on to the next one here. So we're moving into our 4th tip of 6. So we're about at the halfway. Again, like I've mentioned, as much as I love just monologuing at you all, I would love to have some questions and things that we can chat on together to make this more interactive and as beneficial as possible for you too. So feel free to populate some questions, comments, anything that you have into the chat window within the screen there. So 4 of 6, we're going to chat about blending entertainment and education. Obviously, for us, our program, Disney Code Illusion, we clearly very much support this and believe in this, especially the embracing media component. Something that I found very, very interesting was that there's a lot of research and data that supports that when students are working with characters that they recognize, it helps them to retain and comprehend information better. This is especially true as it relates to coding and programming. So I almost want to say that again. When students work with recognizable characters, it helps them to retain and comprehend information better. So by pulling in those familiar faces, your students, not only is their interest going to be piqued kind of from the jump, but what they are learning is going to be a bit more sticky and have a bit more relevance for them. Obviously, when they're working with recognizable characters, there's typically an element of gamification. So again, it's that entertainment bit. And so we want to help keep those students interested, engaged, all while they're learning the real and relevant programming concepts. Something I think here when we talk about entertainment and education where it might get kind of a bad rap is that we think that it's then, just too fun, or they're just playing a computer game and there's no real substance to it. the right programs are out there and exist where all of this is done in a very thoughtful and intentional way, where the entertainment piece is ticking the box to keep them connected to the program, but the education bit is just as there and just as relevant in the sense that what they're learning is very comprehensive, very substantial, that will keep them motivated at the same time. I think you can't have one or the other, but you need to have both that are at an equal balance. That education needs to test them to keep them engaged, but it needs to be entertaining where they don't get overwhelmed and it doesn't get boring. So it's a really big kind of balancing act there. So to put this into practice, we want to make sure that you are utilizing programs that allow students to, recreate their favorite scenes, interact with well-known characters, and leans into gamification. Obviously, like I mentioned, our program, Disney Code Illusion, does just that, but we're very aware that there are others out there that are awesome as well. There's ones, with Minecraft, that's like all the rage, Legos, things like that, where at least I can't speak for so much for the educational components of those, but I know from the entertainment side, they're ticking the box where students are at least, interested and intrigued straight out of the gate. So again, want to make sure that you're fully evaluating kind of how the curriculum will progress, but at least the entertainment bit will keep their interest, and then, you can kind of double back and fill in from the education side. So the fifth of 6 tips that we have here to make the coding curriculum engaging for all student types, I think I said this at the beginning, but this one is actually one of my favorites, is getting off the screen. I like to say, obviously it probably sounds counterintuitive. You're like, okay, we're doing coding, it's on computers. How am I going to teach my students if we're not actually on the screen? There's a lot that you can do that easily translates, live off of the screen where you don't need to have your devices. So, these basic concepts can be easily learned, and it keeps the students' interest just because it's kind of a new way of presenting information. So what you want to do here is break those fundamental concepts down into manageable chunks through interactive off-screen exercises. I have a couple listed here that we'll chat through, but there's many, many more. So again, just kind of want to get the wheels turning for you. So putting into practice, the ones that we'll talk through today, there's something called sandwich sequences, command cards, binary beads. And these are just, again, a sampling of some exercises that you can do off the screen that help to lay a good foundation for your coding education curriculum that also translates very well once they go back onto the screen. So binary beads, for example, essentially every command can be translated into binary code, which is the core of all programming languages. What we want to do here is teach students very simple translations by making these beaded binary necklaces. They can be bracelets, what have you. And essentially they'll have a really fun time turning letters into fun strings of zeros and ones of their name. It'll be something they'll get to take home. They'll be excited to chat to their family, parents, things about that. But again, just setting that foundation, introducing binary code, again, the core of all programming languages. Sandwich sequences. You've likely heard this in other contexts here, but what we want to do is reinforce that coding is a cumulative and also a very literal process. So by having them have to document and break down the exact steps that it takes to accomplish something, they'll start to see, how literal, again, a computer or a student next to them will interpret what they have written. So for a sandwich, you want them to, be aware of how important order is, as well as thoroughness. And because, again, the computer will take things in a literal nature, you want to have students essentially make a sandwich, but writing down every step that they took to or would take to make that sandwich. Then they need to pass the instructions along to another student. They'll quickly see that what they've given to that student, once they need to start acting on that they've missed important bits of information. Again, it's going to stress the relevance and the importance of being very detail-oriented, and again, how literal a computer is with the information that you program into it. The last one that we have here, command cards. So essentially before learning any coding language, kids can start to learn the structure of coding. So what we want to do here is print out cards that have directions for moving, left, right, up, down. You can get essentially some type of like action figure, or it can be anything. It can be a bead, it can be a pen, just something. And you have students draw cards to determine how that little item is going to move. After a few rounds, you lay out all the used cards and the directions in order, and then you have a visual sequence that is very similar to coding. And so you start having those steps together. So again, it starts laying the foundation for structure. So again, those are just 3 quick examples that are off screen. Something else that we heard from an educator that we've been working with, and I just thought this was so cool and also just very innovative. Her school just unfortunately didn't have resources yet by way of actual robots. And so what she had her students do is act as if they were robots. One student, would program certain functions and sequences. The other student had to literally interpret and do exactly what was told of them. And so, you'd have students kind of bonking into desks or turning into other students because they were having to remain very literal with what was told to them. So again, you can get creative. There's lots of ways that you can start to present this information that doesn't have to be complicated, expensive. None of that needs to necessarily come in here. So our 6th and final tip here is all about drawing real-world connections. I know for myself in particular, this is one that's very important to me and the way that I like to learn and kind of approach information. But the biggest thing here is kind of understanding the why behind the what. What's the bigger picture? Where does this all fit in? What is this going to do for me? And I think for students, that's a really important bit too. With coding, we want to help them understand where it fits into their everyday lives. So again, both academically and non-academically. On the academic side, you can easily connect it for them into the other subject matter areas that it can translate for them. So we know when students are active with coding and programming, it does go into cross-disciplinary things by way of language, English, math, science, and all of the different classes that fit into that. Even on the math side, with physics, things of that nature. And so there's a lot of crossover and translation there, so we can connect those dots for students, as well as just connecting to them the ways in which how far-reaching coding is and how it's not just your, tablet, it's not just your Chromebook that you're working on or your smartphone, but getting them to understand how code truly is all around us and how it powers, everything from, machines in a hospital to the power grid that's around us every day to just simply your devices in your kitchen. So, your microwave, your smart toaster, your doorbell, your smart doorbell, getting them to list off and understand everything that's around us that is powered by and running by code will quickly connect those dots of how relevant things can be for them. Outside of that, I think it's also very, very important to utilize a program or you yourself to facilitate the creation of projects that put their skills that they're learning into practice. So what we have here in our bottom box is our recommendation is, not only discuss everyday items that are powered by code, but make sure that we're creating projects that put skills learned into practice. So this could be, you task them with creating a school logo based off of the media art skills that they've learned already. You task them with creating, a website for the school, or it could just be a landing page. Maybe, you have a Girls Who Code Club and you guys can create a website together, leveraging, the skills that you've learned on the web design front. Or you can also utilize a program that's created these external projects and assignments for you that helps essentially these students to kind of start to create portfolio pieces, things of that nature that, again, once they're cut loose from the programs, allow them to understand how they can continue this on their own. So, okay, going to take a quick pause here for some questions. Let's see what we have going on here. And we'll get right back into it. I see one question here about access to the presentation to use. We'll make sure that, like Corey said, that there'll be a recording of the session that we'll share after. I'm also happy to connect with you to chat through any of these if you'd like after as well. So then moving on here, so that takes us through our tips. I do want to quickly kind of go over some programs that are out there that you can utilize. So what we'll do here is we will chat through Disney Code Illusion in particular, as I would love to share a bit more about that with you all. So essentially, where does Disney Code Illusion for Schools come in? How do we kind of fit into this equation based off of, what is needed to make coding curriculum engaging and relevant for students as well as educators? We know we need to tick a lot of boxes along the way. So where we come in here, again, to recap, we chatted about this at the beginning, but we leverage over 10 years of experience. Our biggest thing here is making sure that the curriculum is engaging and enjoyable and that it's designed for each and every student. I know sometimes, or maybe you're potentially thinking like, how can it be for every student? What ages is this for? What's it appropriate for? What we like to say is that we like to think of it, coding essentially is a foreign language. You're learning a new language. And so it's not so much age restrictive as it is prior experience restricted. So the way we translate this, if you are going to learn Spanish, but you are 10 years old or you are 90 years old and you've never done Spanish before, you're all gonna start at Spanish 1, right? So that's how we like to think about our coding curriculum. It starts very ground level, base level, and very quickly scaffolds up from there, making it accessible and appropriate to a vast array of age ranges. Again, it just depends on prior coding experience and essentially where they're coming to the table from. Within the program, though, we have 125 comprehensive step-by-step coding lessons to make sure there's good structure for the students. You don't need to have coding experience required before. This is both for you as an educator or your students. Like to have the program, again, be very user-friendly across the board, both for facilitator and for learner. And then the last bit here is that on our end, we custom design the curriculum to best fit your needs. So we want to make sure that we don't really subscribe to the school of thought that there's these like packages like, oh, this is your school, you're going to have our, A package or our B package. We think every school is very, very unique. And so within that, there's certain considerations and amendments that need to be made within the curriculum to ensure that goals are hit. So that's something that we do here, is that we very much customize the curriculum to help you meet those goals and needs for you. Again, just to reinforce, at the heart of what we're doing, our mission, nurturing and maximizing each learner's unique potential. We think the main way that you're able to do that is by providing the best learning experience to each learner. So again, core to what we do is blending that entertainment with education bit. Additionally, you might be wondering, where do we kind of fit in? There's so many programs, so many resources out there and available to me. So we tend to see programs falling into one of two camps. You can be kind of the block-based coding, or you can be more career-centric coding. On the block-based side, again, don't want it to seem like all of these programs definitely have merit and can fit in at different times. On the block-based side, though, what we tend to hear is that while it can be a good, quick introduction, very quickly it becomes too easy for students. And we hear that from educators a lot, and that the students kind of check out, they lose interest, and so you're kind of just stuck in that sense. On the other side of things, the more career-centric can be a bit more robust on the curriculum side. We'll hear that students find it a bit too dry and a bit too complex. So again, two totally different ends of the spectrum, one leaning in a bit more to entertainment, the other side leaning in more to education, but both ultimately that are disengaging, checking out, not into what's being presented in front of them. We like to, almost like a Venn diagram, we're right in that sweet spot. So where we blend entertainment with education. The curriculum itself is what we have, adults that are looking to change career paths that utilize very similar to curriculum to what we offer in our school, for our school program as well. But then it obviously has the entertainment piece by utilizing, known and loved Disney characters, getting to program and recreate original Disney movie scenes. So we're kind of right in that sweet spot where we're bridging that gap in the learning experience. So drilling down a little bit more just into some key features, we'll go through this pretty quickly here. But just in a nutshell, so Disney Code Illusion for Schools, we are 125 lessons across 7 chapters. We focus on 4 core foundational programming languages. So HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and processing. Again, a really great spot to start here. This really segues nicely into other coding languages that exist and can be learned. Again, it's going to lay a really solid foundation for the students. We also, in our 125 lessons, span 3 focus areas. So you have media art, web design, and game development. What we do here is that this is a comprehensive curriculum, and so you can't just kind of cherry pick only media art or only web design, because what you'll quickly see is that skills, concepts, things that are covered across all of the various subject matters and focus areas become applicable to all. So in that way, it's needed that you kind of progress and go through each and every section. As I mentioned, 125 comprehensive lessons across 7 chapters. The image you see here, this is what we call our magic circle. So magic circle is essentially your home screen and how you navigate through your lessons. You'll see in the center, there's icons of each of these chapters. So Donald, Duck, Goofy, Mickey Mouse, and kind of our starter principal guy. The numbers around the icons themselves are gem lessons. So these are very bite-sized, quick lessons that start to introduce concepts. And then when you click on the icon itself, there are additional what we call book lessons that are a bit more robust lessons that put all the pieces of the gem lessons into practice in a more comprehensive review. So again, that step-by-step approach, very building block to ensure that we are presenting the information in a way that is going to be achievable, accessible, as well as going to keep the attention of students. Like I was just mentioning to you here, this is that step-by-step approach again. So gem lessons, book lessons. What you see on the right side, though, kind of that graphic that we have for you here, I think that's very important, that we have an intentional kind of scaffolding approach that, again, starts you from the ground level and quickly advances you from beginner concepts to intermediate concepts to advanced concepts. The main thing being, if you can kind of see in these screens, is that what we talked about for our first tip, the do first, analyze second, that's very, very prevalent and present here in what we do. So while there's a step-by-step approach, so it's still providing structure for those learners who need structure, it's at the same time encouraging students to freely manipulate the code. Be curious about what happens. Something that's great is even if the code is written incorrectly, it will still show an output based on what you've written. Some other programs, there will be no movement if it's written wrong, but in that way, students can start to see, okay, if I change, my ellipse size to 5,000, what is it going to do on the screen? And they start to get curious, and it starts to spark and kind of create new ideas for them of things that they can create, concepts that they can learn. And again, it just continues that level of understanding and thirst kind of for knowledge within the coding space. Also, each student has a virtual mentor. Love this because they always have someone there that is going to help them get through the lessons. In addition to this virtual mentor, they also, we have what we call a no stuck experience, meaning that there are hints for students at the ready if and when they need them. So again, we see for a lot of students, they get very frustrated. Completion rates can be very, very low if they hit that bottleneck and they're not able to progress. They just don't get it. They get frustrated. They shut down. So we want to make sure, again, we're setting students up for success as well as the educator, because we know it can be hard to facilitate to a room of 20, 30 students, what have you. And so with the virtual mentor, with the hints at the ready, they're able to continue to progress and continue to move, thoughtfully while remaining engaged and excited about what they're doing. We also have in-lesson reviews. So you'll remember we said this, that we want to make sure in that step-by-step approach that you have things that are intentionally reinforcing key knowledge checks. It's done so in a way that the student doesn't feel overwhelmed, like they're being graded all the time. But again, it's going to recap important concepts as well as before they enter new lessons, exit old lessons, they'll have to answer a couple of questions as well. So there's many different ways that information is being reinforced. So not only are they getting, the experience hands-on, they're having the step-by-step approach, they're having the strategic knowledge checks, they're remaining engaged because of the blending of the entertainment and education. So it's ticking a lot of boxes for them in that regard. Something that we like to mention as well is that there is no software installation or setup required on your end. I know this can be a big kind of bottleneck from the tech stack piece. Everything is browser-based, and so runs through Google Chrome. I know a lot of people utilize Chromebooks, but essentially all you have to do, Chrome is the preferred browser. It's plug and play. Students log in and they're good to go. Another bit that we like to chat about here is that student data privacy, things like that. We don't collect any information from the students. Essentially working with you, be it at the district level, school level, classroom level, you will essentially just say to us, I'm going to have 30 students in my class. We'll generate those 30 IDs and passwords for you. You then kind of assign them out to students as you see fit. So on our end, our system doesn't collect anything. We don't store anything. So we don't have to kind of worry about that privacy piece, which is, a very big concern and top of mind. Additionally, teachers' resources. What we like to do here is, again, as I've mentioned many, many times, not only considering the students' experience with the program, but we know how important it is for the teachers and the facilitators to have a really good experience with the programs themselves. So what we like to do and what we've created is a slew of resources to make instruction and facilitation as easy as possible. Essentially, we've created for you these detailed lesson overviews that serve almost as like a teacher's textbook that helps you with, the concepts that are going to be introduced. It's almost like your cheat sheet of what the output windows should look like. If your students have questions, it's kind of, a cliff notes of like commonly asked questions, things that will help you with that facilitation bit. We also have, obviously we've created teachers' dashboards, things of that nature. So it's anything that you need for instruction and facilitation, we provide you with these resources to make that as easy as possible. And again, knowing that there's going to be just kind of varying skill, comfort levels, things like that. So if you need this, you can lean into it and use it a lot. If you're a little bit more, proficient in certain areas, you can use it to the level that you're comfortable with. Finally here, so real world applications. We also talked about this, about drawing that connection to the real world. On the whole, see this as a very big gap with coding education programs that currently exist. You are oftentimes limited to just the environment and the ecosystem that that program operates and runs in. But what happens, once the student is done with that class for the semester or the year? How are they able to continue learning, growing on their own? What are, those external programs that they can utilize to continue working on, a portfolio or developing their skills, or again, that curiosity we've been working so hard to nurture and encourage, want them to continue to move forward with that. So what we've done is create, assignments that essentially connect to the real world through various text editors and an external platform that is not the Disney Code Illusion platform. And this is something that leverages, the universal libraries for all the coding languages, so they're able to utilize it whether they are working with Disney Code Illusion or without it. So we've kind of, we do it in a scaffolding approach, just like the curriculum itself, starting pretty, kind of basic for knowledge checks, utilizing some of those Mad Lib formats like we talked about, and then it progresses into stuff that's a bit more comprehensive and a little bit more advanced. So we have, some midterms, some finals, things like that. But again, all of it builds within these, just like everything else in the program. We have teachers' notes, teachers' instructions, student notes, students' instructions, things like that. But the biggest thing here is that we're really just focused on bridging the gap to the real world application to make that really apparent for students so they continue to remain interested in what they're doing. The last bit here, love sharing this. Now this is going to vary based off of class structure, goals, prior coding experience, things like that. So I want to say that as a caveat. But it's very important when assessing coding education programs to bring into the classroom or into your school or into your district that you kind of evaluate the overall progression. So what will my students be able to do, and what is the growth plan and trajectory as they go grade to grade, year to year? So we have that kind of mapped out here. A lot of the stuff in blue that you see here all centers around the Disney Code Illusion environment. We do, during these first 5 levels, we do leverage external projects, things of that nature. But as you start to progress to like level 6, level 7 that you see here, it is a lot more project-based learning, all things that we help to facilitate. But we also think that it's very relevant that stuff needs to be taken out of this kind of stuffy educational environment and also encourage where it's more like project-based learning, creating their own products, leveraging code that exists in the world. But we have a strategic plan that kind of scales them all the way through level 1 to level 7 over the course of a handful of years that makes it, really relevant and intentional for each student as they progress with their curriculum. So take another pause for some questions. Let's see here. I know Satoshi's kind of been chatting through a bit, which is so great, and I really appreciate that. But yeah, we're about at the end here. So if you have any other questions for us to discuss, feel free to pop that in there now. Otherwise, let's see here. Otherwise, outside of, I know Satoshi collected some email addresses. If you're interested in learning more, 2 ways that you can do that. You can email me directly. It's listed here. I'll leave this slide up even after we wrap here in a couple of minutes. But yeah, it's just my first name, so Amanda, and then our company, lifeistech-usa.com. You can visit our website as well, so just codeillusion.io. And then we have our, for schools landing page there. You can kind of fill out one of those forms if you'd like to request more information, and we'll gladly jump on the line and chat with you. As I was mentioning, what we love to do is we love to kind of do these custom audits and assessments of, where you're at currently by way of coding education and where we think, we can take the program to. Again, it's all no hassle. It's very collaborative and custom to what you're needing. And so if you guys are interested in that or would love to learn more about that, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We would love to chat to you. I know that's my favorite part of the job is just getting to meet you all and getting to work with you and help, bring your coding education and computer science dreams to life. So that's super, super fulfilling. So like I said, don't hesitate to reach out. You can email me here, visit the website, and we can go from there. But yeah, that's about it from my end. That's what we had for today. Oh, perfect. Q&A. How hard is it to use the external projects? Great question. So external projects, I'm going to toggle back a couple of pages here. Let me see. So external projects, we have essentially made these in the same format as the self-propelled learning cycle within the Disney Code Illusion program itself. So by way of complexity, it is still on the very easy side, designed to be approachable for both students and educators alike. The external program platform that we utilize is something called REPL IT. If you're not familiar, it's essentially just a basic text editor or like an IDE. What you'll do with those is we've already created the projects within that platform. You create your account. Essentially, then there's what they call like a fork function. You fork that, the students have their instructions, and it's plug and play from there. So very, very easy, very accessible. You are supplied with all information that you need. You also have access to a dedicated customer success lead, as well as 24/7 access to customer support. So if you ever have questions, anything that you need, we're reachable, as well as included is you do get dedicated trainings with your customer success lead to walk you through, how to use the external projects, how to facilitate, how to appropriately pace standard lessons. So we try to make sure that we're with you every step of the way, again, with the importance being on making this the best experience possible for both the students and the educator alike. Good question. Thank you for that. Alrighty. Well then, yeah, that does it. Hope everyone has had a great conference. I know in the virtual format, it's been fun to adjust to, I'll say, but I've loved getting to share this with you, and we hope to hear from you guys soon. So don't hesitate to reach out. But that's about it. So thank you guys.